Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Mitzvah Day. We're excited and delighted to have Rabbi Joshua Rabin leading off our morning as our guest speaker. Rabbi Rabin is a community and government affairs liaison at LiveOnNY, New York, specifically focusing on the Jewish community. Rabbi Rabin also serves as the rabbi of the Astoria Center of Israel in Astoria, Queens. He received his smicha, his rabbinic ordination, and a certificate in pastoral counseling from the Jewish Theological Seminary, JTS, in 2011, and completed executive education at institutions including Harvard Business School, the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and the Disney Institute. Josh is a recipient of the Wexner Field Fellowship and the Ruskay Fellowship for Jewish Professional Leadership, so he's very smart. Rabbi Rabin lives on the Upper West Side with his wife, Rabbi Yael Hammerman, and they are the parents of Hannah, Shai, and Ella. And you can read more of Rabbi Rabin's writings by visiting www.joshuarabin.com, Rabin, R-A-B-I-N. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Rabin.
Okay, that's better. All right. Thank you so much to Rabbi Kaiserman and the entire Mitzvah Day planning team for inviting me to share a little bit of words with you today. You might be wondering, like, what does a rabbi who works in organ donation actually do all day? Well, one of the things I do is things like this, and I'm gonna share a little bit of information with you and sort of just to contextualize for a moment what we're really talking about when we talk about organ donation. Because one of the interesting things about organ donation as a topic is that on the one hand, it has an extremely high approval rating. It's kind of a hard thing to be against, right? But it's also a thing that has a high approval rating that people don't think about really all that much, to the extent that they think about it. Unless someone in their life is actively dealing with the question, they maybe think about it for a few seconds at the DMV, because that's where most people, if they register to be organ donors, register. But beyond that, it's not really something we think about all that much. So I wanted to sort of frame what we're really talking about by showing you just a quick video clip from the local news that's a little over a year old.
Children not only got to meet that heart recipients, but they also listened to how the heart sounds now. This is the moment Christina Moon once again felt her husband's heart beating. FDNY firefighter Billy Moon's heart was successfully transplanted into 63-year-old Richard Grell last December, just days after Moon died during a rescue training exercise in Brooklyn. Thursday night is the first time that the Moons met the man who got Billy's heart. During a meeting at the organ donor nonprofit LiveOnNY, New York, Moon's widow, his two young children, and his mother all took turns listening to Billy's heart in Rich's body.
He was passionate, and passion comes from the heart, so to hear that the heart is still beating is really emotional.
9-year-old Colin moved to tears.
It feels like when I would take naps right next to my dad, and it feels like I was right next to him,
And Moon's widow says Billy always pushed others to be organ donors, and 5 of his organs were donated after his death. Now, Live On New York is encouraging New Yorkers to sign up. You can do that either through the DMV or a national organ donor database. Shirley?
He was a hero in life and a hero in death as well. Thank you, Ellen.
So I watch this video clip a lot. It's hard not to be struck by just the basic event you're sort of watching take place. It's a good reminder to me, speaking as a rabbi, that our bodies don't know what religion we practice. They also don't know what language we speak or how much money we make or our political party affiliation. All the categories that like people on an external level group themselves into, oftentimes to the detriment of us and others, have very little relevance to the inside of our body, the part that actually allows the body to work. And so you think about what can be accomplished when you think about a topic that involves recognizing how much people at their core are really all the same. And I think about organ donation because, you know, every day there are stories like the one I just shared with you of people who, you know, a day or so before would have had maybe absolutely nothing in common, no reason to be in contact with each other, and now they have a part of their loved one living inside of the part of another person. It's hard not to see what spiritual significance that has when you really get down to it. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about saving lives, but we're also talking about a way in which all human beings, no matter who they are, have the potential to do something transformative for another person, something that transcends all of our worldly boundaries. So, if you've never heard of Live On New York, that's okay. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. Maybe the first time you heard about it was when you saw my name listed on the program for today. Live On New York's not a Jewish organization. Live On New York is designated by the federal government of the United States to handle deceased organ and tissue donation in the downstate New York area, which means that anywhere in the 5 boroughs, Long Island, Westchester, Rockland, Orange, Dutchess County, if you heard on the news that, say, someone, you know, died in a hospital in Queens and their lungs were donated to someone in a hospital in Rockland County, someone has to be responsible for actually going to the hospital and talking to the family about organ donation, for doing the testing and the coordination between hospitals and transplant centers, for transporting organs from one place to another, for working on the aftercare issues of the donor family. We are the people at the nexus of making that happen. I am not also a transplant surgeon in my spare time, so I'm not, like most of our work is clinical, but I'm a part of the community and government affairs team, is a team of about 15 people who work in all kinds of areas that I just mentioned, teaching about this topic proactively. Some of us focus on specific geographic areas, and some of us focus on specific cultural, religious, racial groups where having a common language to talk about organ donation is helpful. So for example, my boss in this job is Chinese American. She speaks fluent Mandarin. She has background in government, and she spends a lot of her time in Chinatown and parts of Flushing, you know, where there's large concentrations of Chinese Americans, so that she can basically do what I'm doing, but speak, you know, in a language, literally and metaphorically, that people in that community can understand. So by the same token, I am the person who goes out anywhere in the Jewish community in that area and does this work to talk to people. So on Thursday, I was out in Westbury at Temple Or Elohim doing a lunch and learn. I spoke on Friday night at Bethel in Great Neck about a month ago. I was at a Mitzvah day. I'll be at the Woodlands Community Temple like 2 weeks from now on an end of life planning class that they're doing. And that's sort of what my days and weeks are like, so that I can talk about this in a way that people understand using Jewish language. Because the Jewish community tends to under-register and under-authorize being organ donors. You might be a little bit surprised to hear that. We're going to come back to why. Just hold on for a moment. But just to give you a little bit of the statistics. So about 9,000 New Yorkers are waiting for a life-saving transplant. About 80% of those people are in the area that I described. The rest are distributed in all the other counties in what we would call upstate New York or anywhere outside of where I described. Organ donation is also a social justice issue. People of color are more likely to need life-saving transplants and less likely to choose organ donation as a part of their final wishes. If you think about the medical system, and it has many amazing qualities to it, it also has imperfections like everywhere else in society, and there are barriers when you start talking about communities of color that lead to the likelihood of needing a transplant more often, but also barriers to getting transplants that are really unfortunate and really criminal, for lack of a better word. And it affects every place you go. So this is your zip code, 11375. In this zip code alone, there are 34 people waiting for a transplant as of the last time we got the data. It gets updated every spring. So 34 people needed a transplant, and there were 4 successful transplants performed. So that means out of a total of 38 people, 4 of them got a transplant. So if I wanted to do math, I wouldn't have gone to rabbinical school. 4 out of 38, I don't know what percentage that is, but it's not good. That's like a little over 10%. A little under, so it's a little under 10%. So it's not good. Not good, right? But rest assured, this is both good news and bad news. You're not alone in this. Like, I do this everywhere I speak, and those numbers are almost never, at 100%. So, but once you start multiplying, these numbers by 1,800 zip codes, which is about the number of zip codes we have in the state of New York, it's not hard to imagine how you end up with 9,000 people on a waiting list. And, every donor who says yes makes a big difference. This is an audience where I don't have to necessarily explain what this means, but it's always fascinating when I speak to audiences of religious leaders that are not primarily Jewish. Every one person who passes away and becomes an organ donor has the potential of saving 8 lives due to the parts of their body that can be donated, as in, 18, chai, for life. So even there's gematria, there's like numerology, even saying that this is like the ultimate Jewish thing that you should do. And even if organ donation is not something that interests a person, tissue donation and cornea donation, all these things also serve a value. So if you know someone in your life who's ever been a victim of a catastrophic burns, like 3rd-degree burns and needs skin grafts, or you have someone in your life who died of a disease where they need as many tissue samples as they can get to do medical research, right? That's also a part of what this is about. So in addition to saving people's lives, we improve lives in the long haul by registering. And it's never too late. This is a picture of a 98-year-old man in West Virginia who passed away and his liver was donated. One of the biggest reasons people don't donate is because they assume they're too old. Does this mean that every 98-year-old, if we all should be so lucky to live to 98, does that mean that every 98-year-old is a good candidate to be an organ donor? Probably not, but it is a good reminder that I encourage people never to self-disqualify. Choosing to register as an organ donor is a value statement. It's a value statement that under the circumstances where I could do it, I would like to do it. There's no guarantee, even if you register, that you actually ever will do it, right? That requires a very specific set of conditions, but it's never too late. It's never too late. Because about 1 New Yorker every day dies waiting for a transplant. And that's a hard number to swallow. New York used to be literally 50th out of 50 in states around organ donation registration. We're not at the bottom anymore, but we're close to the bottom. I'm proud to say that Live on New York itself, like in terms of when we have opportunities, we're close to the top. But as far as registration goes, our state is towards the bottom. Part of that reason is because this part of the state is so diverse. This is why so many of my colleagues and I do this work, sometimes speaking in totally different languages or about different religious traditions, because if you think about Queens, right, think about how many languages are spoken in Queens alone, and you get a sense for how many different cultural groups you got to be able to talk about organ donation to in a language they understand. So, Judaism and organ donation. So, again, one of the reasons a rabbi works for this organization is because we want people to say yes. People are more likely to say yes if the person doing the asking or the teaching or the advocacy is someone who's like them, which I don't think is hard to understand why, but that's why you get me and not someone who, might be lovely but doesn't know that much about Judaism. So let's talk about Judaism and organ donation. So unfortunately, the Jewish community tends to under-register as organ donors still. And most of these are for reasons that I would charitably refer to as like a bubba misa. So we're going to run through a few of these bubba misas just so that you can not worry about it. Okay, so most popular bubba misa. Yes, you can be buried in a cemetery if you donate your organs. By the way, this is true no matter what flavor of Judaism you practice. There are some, I will get to the one area of organ donation where some people have some questions, which mainly is in the Orthodox community, but this particular myth, which is the number one myth, I'll defer to your rabbi to reiterate that what I'm saying is not made up, but yes, you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery if you donate your organs. Yes, ideally in Judaism, we don't want to encourage people during their life to self-mutilate their body. But plenty of us will end up, when we pass away, without all the parts we came into the world with. What if your appendix burst at some point in your life, or your tonsils were removed, or you God forbid, had to have a limb amputated? To not say nothing of all the teeth you lose and the hair you lose. Like, nobody is born into the world with all the things they come. That's not nice. That's okay. But nobody is born into the world and goes out of the world with all the things they came in with. And if you're going to leave it, give it for someone to save their life, it would supersede any ideal, in Judaism that you should end up in a cemetery with all the parts you came in with. Which leads to number two, that nothing changes about your Jewish funeral. Okay, so if you already have made plans for, a plot or, what funeral home you would preferably use or whatever it is, it doesn't change anything about the funeral. There's no difference in a Jewish funeral between someone who donates their organs and someone who does not. By the way, this is not really a thing in most Jewish communities, but if, for religious traditions that involve viewings, like a body, like an open casket, right? It doesn't change that either. So generally speaking, most Jewish funerals are closed casket, but even if it weren't, it wouldn't change it. And this is my favorite one. In the Reform Siddur, when you recite the Amidah, there's a blessing that you recite that says, Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hakol. Praised are you, Lord our God, who gives life to all. This, I don't know when the Reform movement changed it. It's been at least over a century. But this was a change of a previous blessing that praised God for reviving the dead. Because some Jews believe in their theology that might happen in the future. So it leads to my favorite Baba Misa, which is, what if there's a Messiah one day and all of us get to come back to life, but I've donated my heart? Does that mean that I'm going to be kept out of this? And I will not make judgments about whether or not you believe that might happen in the future, but you should know that Maimonides, as of 1,000 years ago, said that is not a reason to worry about it, right? If you don't use these things, they shrivel up in the ground. So if there's a Messiah one day and frankly, I do really hope that there's a Messiah one day, and that involves, if that involves, people coming back to life, great, but you're donating your organs ain't going to be a problem if that's the case. The main reason why people don't, so that's the reason why people think they shouldn't register to be organ donors. The main reason people do not say yes in the moment when you have to ask a family is really a reason that's actually quite universal to organ donation and why it's hard to understand, which is that most people will not die in such a way that they can donate their organs. It has to be a very specific kind of way of dying, which is an unpleasant thing to talk about. It is when a person dies in a hospital after being already hooked up to a ventilator. Most of us will not die that way. And so most people, most of the time, for most of history, what we would consider death was that their heart would stop. And when your heart stops and the blood stops flowing in your body, the organs become useless very, very quickly. But thanks to medical technology, starting in, say, the 60s and the 70s, it became much more feasible for doctors to allow the body to function such that you could recover organs, which essentially meant that there was a new definition of dying that almost didn't exist for thousands of years. Now, in the Jewish community, I as Rabbi Kaiserman mentioned, am a conservative ordained rabbi. I have yet to meet a non-Orthodox rabbi who would not enthusiastically encourage organ donation. If they exist, I would love for someone to introduce me to them because I have yet to meet them. But if you were to ask any Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist rabbi, they would enthusiastically tell you, yes, you should donate your organs. Orthodox rabbis, you would get different answers depending on who you get. But if they do, it's not because they worry about what cemetery you can be buried in. It's because they just want to make sure that according to Jewish law, a person is really dead, not 1 millisecond faster than they need to be. But that's a very different reason to worry about than whether or not you should register as a donor. I'm gonna skip forward because I want to be mindful of time. Jerry, we go until 10, right? 10-ish? Okay. Okay, so so this is the argument that a rabbi who's enthusiastically supportive of organ donation, as I am and most, if not all, non-Orthodox rabbis are, is that it fulfills two mitzvot, right? The one you probably know the most is that it's pikuach nefesh, it's saving a life, right? People who need life-saving organs will die without them eventually, and that obligation supersedes almost any other commandment. And so even if it means that the doctors have to do an additional procedure for us, or it takes a little bit longer to get out of the hospital and get your funeral done, all of those things are secondary to the value that you could save a life as your sort of final act of tzedakah in this world. The second one, which is a little bit more, let's call it giving you marching orders, is a mitzvah that I would call lo tamod al dam re'echa, which is don't stand idly by while your neighbor's blood is shed, which basically in Jewish law is interpreted to mean that if you have the means and the ability and there's minimal risk to save another person's life and you don't, it's not just that you haven't performed a positive mitzvah, you've actually violated a negative mitzvah. So, as they say, you can't take it with you. So when we pass away, right, there's a last chance to save somebody else's life. And if we don't do it, there's no risk at that point because we're not alive anymore. And so the argument can be made that by not agreeing to donate our organs, we're actually leaving the world not fulfilling a positive mitzvah and violating a negative mitzvah. And this is why, by the way, that actually all strands of Judaism, and this includes, I have very limited interactions with, say, the Hasidic or Haredi ultra-Orthodox communities in New York, but even if you went into those communities, they would tell you that all of them are supportive of living donation for this reason. The reasons that anyone has a concern is about making sure that end-of-life issues are handled in the way that Judaism would want, and that means that if that becomes a question you have, you ask your rabbi, but your rabbi will help you through that. You know, again, don't self-disqualify because of a Bubba Maisa. Because, you know, it's really powerful to understand what it means for you, what it will mean also for you and your family if you make that decision. People who die in such a way that they donate their organs die in some of the most tragic ways that we can die. Okay, so Billy Moon died in a training accident in a fire. But if you look at our our database where we're monitoring cases, you will see car accidents, drownings, gunshot wounds, drug overdoses, death by suicide, sudden brain hemorrhages. These are some of the worst ways that a family or a person can leave this world. And it's horrifying. Nobody gets up that morning thinking that this is going to be a thing that they're dealing with. And it's also part of the reason that I talk about this now, because if you don't know anything about it now, it's a really, really bad time to learn about all of it for the first time when you're dealing with the shock and grief of a loved one who is sitting there, in a bed, unlikely to recover. And this is a picture of what we call an honor walk. So in many hospitals where they have, when a patient's family and a patient agrees to organ donation, as they're wheeling the patient to the operating room where the organs will be what we call recovered. Now we don't like the word harvested, as you can imagine, right? When they're being recovered, people will line both sides of the hallway out of respect for what this patient is about to do. So, let's say that I've convinced you and you want to donate, or you want to register as a donor. If you've already registered, you've probably done it on your driver's license. That's where about 80% of New Yorkers who are registered do it. I do all the people on our staff, even if we don't want to, table at a DMV, DMVs. So if you go to a DMV in Queens on any given day, chances are you will see someone from our staff there. I live in Manhattan, so I table at some of the DMVs in Manhattan. So if any of you commute into the city and have ever been to License Express, which is right by Penn Station, yes, I see some people smiling, right? You go there right nearby the Long Island Railroad, people. You might have seen one of our staff there, or any other location. But if you don't have a driver's license, you can do it other ways. You can do it when you register to vote. You can do it with an ID NYC. You can do it online, or you can do it here. I have paper copies where you can register right when we're done. I am just going, but let's just make sure that we've clarified any other myths before I wrap up, because I was told 10-ish, and it's 10:03. I feel like that's still in the 10-ish range. Okay, so let's just make sure we're absolutely clear about some of the other myths. So the number one myth of organ donation, whether you're Jewish or not, is a concern that doctors won't work as hard to save you. It's not an unreasonable concern. Frankly, pop culture does not make this easy. Okay, I'm a fan of the original Law & Order, not the remake. I can't watch the remake, but the original Law & Order. About 6 or 7 seasons into Law & Order, there's a story ripped from the headlines of a doctor who has a patient with a gunshot wound, and he lets her die because he wants to take away her heart and lungs so that he can get a better job at another hospital. Okay, it's pretty darn horrifying. It also is impossible because we exist alongside the hospital as checks and balances on each other. We do not keep the person alive or declare them dead, and the hospital does not decide who's going to do organ donation. And the reason for that, and I know that checks and balances in the current political economy might seem a little bit loaded, but it exists for a reason in lots of facets of our lives, which is to say, separate organizations have separate things that they are focusing on. So when a person has a grave prognosis, and that is going to be coming down the road, that's when we are called. But it's not happening without any checks and balances on each other, which is why that Law and Order episode, there was one on Grey's Anatomy, we're not fans of them for this reason. Did I mention that the oldest known organ donor was 98 years old? Yes, that person was in West Virginia, in New York. I thought it was 94. My colleague thinks it's 96. But, you know, let's say in your 90s, that's pretty good to be able to donate an organ. And again, don't self-disqualify. And the third one, which, you know, is a very reasonable one, is, you know, your family doesn't have to pay for it. So, you know, if you already are worried about the health care cost of your loved one going to the hospital for whatever reason brought them there in the first place, you might be wondering, well, where does the money come from to pay for the procedure? And the answer is, it comes at other stages of the process. It's not a cost that you have to bear. Because while it is illegal, and with good reason, to sell organs, they are something of value. They are something of value. So the last thing that people would want to do is make you have to pay so that your family member can save someone else's life. And this leads me to sort of wrapping up my talk. And by the way, I'm here with you for the rest of the morning tabling, so I'll be eager, if not excited, actually eager and excited, to answer any of your questions. But I want to end with this a little additional word of Torah. So in Judaism, caring for a person when they die in Hebrew is known as what we call an act of chesed shel emet. Chesed is the word for kindness, like gimilut chasadim, same root word, and emet means truth. And it's referred to as a true act of kindness because at the end of the Sefer Bereshit, at the end of the book of Genesis, when Jacob summons his son Joseph, he tells Joseph to do an act for me of chesed shel emet, don't bury me in the land of Egypt. This is why as the Israelites are walking through the desert from Egypt to the land of Canaan, what we now call the land of Israel, they're carrying Jacob's bones with them because they have to fulfill this mitzvah. Our medieval commentator Rashi says that acts we do for people when they die are acts of chesed shel emet because we can never expect a reward. Making sure that my loved one has a funeral, a proper funeral and a proper burial is valuable for any number of reasons, not the least of which because my loved one can never pay me back for it. And it's only because of organ donation and advances in medical technology that today, people when they die can do an act of chesed shel emet for the living. Because Richard Grell is not going to be able to pay back Billy Moon for saving his life. So the last thing that Billy Moon did on this earth was the truest act of kindness that a person can do. And that's why I hope that if you're already registered to be a donor, you feel reaffirmed in your decision. If you were on the fence, you'll consider changing your mind. And if you're now still not convinced but are curious, you'll ask me your questions for the rest of the morning and I'll be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for inviting me, and I only wish you all the best of luck with your wonderful Mitzvah Day. Thanks for having me. Did I do okay on time? Yeah. All right, good. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to step out. We have a big funeral tomorrow, and that was the funeral home. So,
No worries. What funeral home?
Schwartz Brothers is the only Jewish funeral home around here to use. So.
Got it. Yeah. No worries. I understand how it goes.
Thank you.
it's a non-issue. Like for people who say are cancer survivors, like if they're in remission for 5 years or more, they can be organ donors. So I'm not positive about hepatitis, but I think you will be. You can ask your doctor, but I think you can. Okay, and before any person actually, before organs are actually recovered from any person, they do a very thorough check. But my belief about that particular condition is that if you've not had it in your body for that long, then it's not a complete disqualification for the rest of your life. Yeah. It shouldn't affect the gout, like for your foot. You're on. So for organ donation, it shouldn't affect your ability to be registered. Blood donation can be a little bit different because the blood has to be used so quickly, and so like active stuff in your system, it's different. But for so it shouldn't disqualify. Just because blood donation might not be possible, it shouldn't necessarily be for a donation. Yeah. Well, it happens to all. It happens to all of us. It happens to all of us at some point. We take more medic, but. You're quite welcome. Nice to meet you. Oh, yeah, I am. I'm gonna just grab my bag. Oh, okay. We can do it in here though. I mean, it is a little quieter than in there. Yeah, what can I do for you? Nice to meet you. I'm sorry? Yeah, so what's great, your son's a first responder, is he an EMT? Oh, okay. We have a lot of people with paramedic backgrounds who work for us, and a lot of them are the transplant coordinators. In Jewish law, I think Rabbi Kaiser would probably say the same thing. In Jewish law, there's a principle that's known as what we call before the fact and after the fact. Like ipso facto, post facto, the same idea. In Hebrew, we call it chila and b'diavad. In a vacuum, you want to be buried as fast as possible. You're not doing anything wrong by being slightly longer than as soon as possible, and you're certainly not doing anything wrong if the reason it's extended is to save someone else's life. So it wouldn't affect any, we're instructed, especially when I go to actual hospitals with families, not to guarantee how long it can take, but you're talking about, additional days, not additional months or weeks.